Don Regio Dolphins. Welcome to our second installment for the Westing game. This is for our 4th through 8th graders. Before we get started reading chapters 3 and 4 today, I wanted to take a minute to review what we read and the activities that I suggested yesterday. Although these activities are not required, I recognize that some of you are going to attempt to do them either in a notebook on binder paper or for my 6th through 8th graders, maybe on a Google Doc on your Chromebook. If you are participating in the activities, I wanted to make sure that we always spent the beginning part reflecting on what we did yesterday, maybe answering questions that you may have, maybe answering things that you weren't able to answer on your own before we move on. Because every little bit that we do now will help us as we're trying to figure out who will be the heir of the will and who murdered Mr. Westing. So, taking a look at our journal from yesterday. Chapters 1 and 2, we had 2 vocabulary words. The words were tenants and grapple. I asked you to write the part of speech with the definition. So the part of speech for tenants is a noun. The definition is a person, business, or group that pays to use another person's property. Someone who rents or leases a house, apartment, etc. Grapple is a verb, and it means to try to solve a problem or to deal with a problem. And then we had another little graphic organizer here all about the setting. And the reason why is because in mystery novels, the setting is very important. It sets the tone and the mood of the story. There's also sometimes clues in the setting as far as the situation is presenting itself. And it's important to kind of keep track of the setting as a way to understand the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. So setting. The location, we have 2 locations. We have the Sunset Towers, which is the apartment building that everybody has moved into. And then we have the Westing Estate. Not all of the apartment buildings overlook the lake and the Westing Estate, but a lot of them do. And you can see the Westing Estate from the apartment building, which is interesting. So although they're not physically at the estate has already played an important role in the location of this story. The time period, it has switched seasons. We are now beginning fall or autumn. We are nearing Halloween, which is oftentimes kind of a spookier time of year. I would say that the mood is, or the time is present time or current time. And the reason why is because it's being written in present tense. It's happening in real time. We're experiencing it as the characters are experiencing it. The mood so far for the story, again, tying back into the fall and autumn take, is definitely chilly, eerie, mysterious. There's a lot of questions that we already have as we're being introduced to the characters. And then finally, the importance of the setting. The families are all brought to this apartment building. We had talked about this, that there were 6 families, 6 invitations sent out, and all 6 of those people ended up moving in, besides a mistake, somebody who wasn't supposed to move in that moved in. What's interesting about that is that clearly there's somebody working behind the scenes to orchestrate this, but we're not sure who this person is and why they're doing that. That is helping to build the mystery and is starting us with asking questions that we don't currently have answers for. So that kind of wraps up what we did yesterday. If you need to pause the video at this time to fill in this information, please do so. Now, the second activity that we did was I had asked you to either draw the apartment building or you could, on like a Google Doc, create a table. We are going to review this once we're done reading today. And the reason why is because we're still going to be introduced to a few more characters today. We did not get to all of them yesterday. So we'll do this at the very end. And then for those of you that are wanting to continue to do activities following along with our learning, please on a new piece of paper or on your next page of your journal or in your Google Doc, title this section chapters 3 and 4. We have 2 new vocabulary words, putrid and meager. Again, I will be stopping as I'm reading this, as I read it in context. and hopefully trying to give you contextual meaning, which will help you with this. Again, the expectation would be that you would go to dictionary.com to find the part of speech and the definition. And then the activity that we're going to do today is talking about mysteries versus thrillers. If you've ever seen movies that are scary movies, sometimes there are mystery movies, the whodunits, versus the thrillers that are kind of action-packed. And we're going to do a contrasting T chart. That's what this is called because it kind of looks like the letter T. If you could write mysteries on one side versus thrillers and then draw a line down the middle, we will do our comparing and contrasting at the end of this reading today. Again, pause the video if you need time to copy this down. Okay, without further ado, let's continue reading. I don't know about you guys, but I was thinking about this story all night last night. I am already hooked. I hope you are too. Chapter 3, Tenants In and Out. Upstairs in 3D, Angela Wexler stood on a hassock as still and blank-faced pretty as a store window dummy. Her pale blue eyes stared unblinkingly at the lake. "Turn, dear," said Flora Baumbach, the dressmaker, who lived and worked in a smaller apartment on the second floor. Angela pivoted in a slow quarter turn. "Oh!" Startled by the small cry, Flora Baumbach dropped the pin from her pudgy fingers and almost swallowed the 3 in her mouth. "Please be careful, Mrs. Baumbach. My Angela has very delicate skin." Grace Windsor Wexler was supervising the fitting of her daughter's wedding dress from the beige velvet couch. Above her hung the 24 framed flower prints she had selected and arranged with the greatest of taste and care. She could have been an interior decorator, a good one too, if it wasn't for the pressing demands of so on and so forth. "Mrs. Baumbach didn't prick me, Mother," Angela said evenly. "I was just surprised to see smoke coming from the Westinghouse chimney." Crawling with slow caution on her hands and knees, Flora Baumbach paused in the search for the dropped pin to peer up through her straight gray bangs. Just want to stop here to say that we've just been introduced to Flora Baumbach, who lives in the smaller apartment in the second floor and is a dressmaker. Mrs. Wexler set her coffee cup on the driftwood coffee table and craned her neck for a better view. "We must have new neighbors. I'll have to drive up there with a housewarming gift. They may need some decorating advice." "Hey, look, there's smoke coming from the Westinghouse." Again, Turtle was late with the news. "Oh, it's you." Mrs. Wexler always seemed surprised to see her other daughter, so unlike golden-haired, angel-faced Angela. Flora Baumbach, about to rise with the found pin, quickly sank down again to protect her sore shin in the shag carpeting. She had pulled Turtle's braid in the lobby yesterday. "Otis Amber says the old man Westing's stinking corpse is rotting on an oriental rug." "My, oh my," Flora Baumbach explained, and Mrs. Wexler clicked her tongue in an irritated tsk. Turtle decided not to go on with the horror story. Not that her mother cared if she got killed or ended up a raving lunatic. "Mrs. Baumbach, could you hem my witch's costume? I need it for tonight." Mrs. Wexler answered, "Can't you see she's busy with Angela's wedding dress? And why must you wear a silly costume like that? Really, Turtle, I don't know why you insist on making yourself ugly." "It's no sillier than a wedding dress," Turtle snapped back. "Besides, nobody gets married anymore, and if they do, they don't wear silly wedding dresses." She was close to a tantrum. "Besides, who would want to marry that stuck-up, know-it-all, marshmallow-faced Dr. Denton?" "That's enough of your smart mouth." Mrs. Wexler leaped up, hand ready to strike. Instead, she straightened and framed a framed flower print, patted her fashionable honey blonde hairdo, and sat down again. She had never hit Turtle, but one of these days. Besides, a stranger was present. "Dr. Deer is a brilliant young man," she explained for Flora Baumbach's ears. The dressmaker smiled politely. "Angela will soon be Angel Deer. Isn't that a precious name?" The dressmaker nodded. "And then we'll have 2 doctors in the family. Now, where do you think you're going?" Turtle was at the front door. "Downstairs to tell Daddy about the smoke coming from the Westinghouse." "Come back this instant. You know your father operates in the afternoon. Why don't you go to your room and work on stock market reports or whatever you do in there?" "Some room. It's even too small for a closet." "I'll hem your witch's costume, Turtle," Angela offered. Mrs. Wexler beamed on her perfect child draped in white. What an angel. Crow's clothes were black, her skin dead white. She looked severe. Rigid, in fact. Rigid and righteously severe. No one could have guessed that under that stern facade her stomach was doing flip-flops as Dr. Wexler cut out a corn. Staring down at the fine lines of pink scalp that showed through the podiatrist's thinning light brown hair did nothing to ease her queasiness. So softly humming a hymn, she settled her gaze on the north window. Smoke! Watch it, Jake Wexler almost cut off her little toe along with the corn. Unaware of the near amputation, the cleaning woman stared at the Westing house. Just to be clear, a podiatrist is a foot doctor, so a doctor that works on people's feet. If you will just sit back, Jake began, but his patient did not hear him. She must have been a handsome woman at one time, but life had used her harshly. Her faded hair, knotted in a tight bun on the nape of her gaunt neck, glinted gold red in the light. Her profile was fine, marred only by the jut of her clenched jaw. Well, let's get on with it. Friday was his busy day. He had phone calls to make. Please sit back, Mrs. Crow. I'm almost finished. What? Jake gently replaced her foot on the chair's pedestal. I see you've hurt your shin. What? For an instant their eyes met, then she looked away. A shy creature, or a guilty one. Crow averted her face when she spoke. Your daughter, Turtle, kicked me, she muttered, staring once again at the Westing house. That's what happens when there is no religion in the home. Sandy says Westing's corpse is up there, rotting away on an oriental rug. But I don't believe it. If he's truly dead, then he's rotting in hell. We are sinners, all of us. What do you mean his corpse is rotting on an oriental rug? Some kind of Persian rug? Maybe a Chinese rug? Mr. Hu joined his son at the glass sidewall of the fifth-floor restaurant. And why were you wasting precious time listening to an overage delivery boy with an overactive imagination when you should have been studying? It was not a question. Doug's father never asked questions. Don't shrug at me. Go study. Sure, Dad. Doug jogged off through the kitchen. It was no use arguing that there was no school tomorrow, just track practice. He jogged down the back stairs, no matter what excuse he gave. Go study, his father would say. Go study. He jogged into the Who's rear apartment, stretched out on the bare floor, and repeated, go study, to 20 sit-ups. Only 2 customers were expected for the dinner hour. Shin Hu's restaurant could seat 100. Mr. Hu slammed the reservations book shut, pressed a hand against the pain in his ample stomach, unwrapped a chocolate bar, and devoured it quickly before acid etched another ulcer. Back home again is he. Well, Westing won't get off so easy this time, not on his life. A small, delicate woman in a long white apron stood in silence before the restaurant's east window. She stared longingly into the boundless gray distance as if far, far on the other side of Lake Michigan lay China. Sandy McSuthers saluted as the maroon Mercedes swung around the curved driveway and came to a stop at the entrance. He opened the car door with a ceremony reserved only for Judge J.J. Ford. Look up there, Judge. There's smoke coming from the Westing house. A tall black woman in a tailored suit, her short clipped hair touched with gray, slipped out from behind the wheel, handed the car keys to the doorman, and cast a disinterested glance at the house on the hill. They say nobody's up there, just the corpse of an old man Westing rotting away on an oriental rug. Sandy reported as he hoisted a full briefcase from the trunk of the car. Do you believe in ghosts, Judge? There is certain to be a more rational explanation. You're right, of course, Judge. Sandy opened the heavy glass door and followed on the judge's heels through the lobby. I was just repeating what Otis Amber said. Otis Amber is a stupid man, if not downright mad. J.J. Ford hurried into the elevator. She should not have said that. Not her. Not the first black, the first woman to have been elected to a judgeship in the state. She was tired after a trying day. That was it. Or was it? So Sam Westing has come home at last. Well, she could sell the car, take out a bank loan, pay him back in cash. But would he take it? Please don't repeat what I said about Otis Amber, Mr. McSuthers. Don't worry, Judge. The doorman escorted her to the door of apartment 4D. What you tell me is strictly confidential. And it was J.J. Ford. And it was. J.J. Ford was the biggest tipper in Sunset Towers. Let's stop there and note that J.J. Ford lives in apartment 4D and is a judge. I saw some... Chris Theodorakis was too excited to stutter out the news to his brother. One arm shot out and twisted up over his head. Dumb arm. Theo squatted next to the wheelchair. Listen, Chris, I'll tell you about that haunted castle on the hill. His voice was soothing and hushed in mystery. Somebody is up there, Chris, but nobody is there. Just rich Mr. Westing, and he's dead. Dead as a squashed June bug and rotting away on a moth-eaten oriental rug. Chris relaxed as he always did when his brother told him a story. Theo was good at making up stories. And the worms are crawling in and out of the dead man's skull, in and out of his ear holes, his nose holes, his mouth holes, in and out of all of his holes. Chris laughed, then quickly composed his face. He was supposed to look scared. Theo leaned closer, and high above the putrid corpse, a crystal chandelier is tinkling. It tinkles and twinkles, but not one breath of air stirs in that gloomy tomb of a room. Gloomy tomb of a room. Theo will make a good writer someday, Chris thought. He wouldn't spoil this wonderful, spooky Halloween story by telling him about the real person up there, the one with the limp. Our first vocab word was used to describe a corpse, a putrid corpse. I would say that based off of the context there, putrid is describing maybe the smell, the stench of the corpse. So Chris sat quietly, his body at ease, and heard about ghosts and ghouls and purple waves, and smiled at his brother with pure delight. A smile that could break your heart, Sidel Pulaski, the tenant in 3C, always said, but no one paid any attention to Sidel Pulaski. So, Sidel Pulaski lives in 3C. Sidel Pulaski struggled out of the taxi, large end first. She was not a heavy woman, just wide hip from years of secretarial sitting. If only there was a ladylike way to get out of a cab. Her green rhinestone-studded glasses slipped down her fleshy nose as she grappled with a tall triangular package and a stuffed shopping bag. If only that lazy driver would lend her a hand. Not for a nickel tip, he wouldn't. The cabbie slammed the back door and sped around the curved driveway, narrowly missing the Mercedes that Sandy was driving to the parking lot. At least the never-there-when-you-need-him doorman had propped open the front door. Not that he ever helped her, or even noticed her, for that matter. No one ever noticed her. Sidel Pulaski limped through the lobby. She could be carrying a high-powered rifle in that package, and no one would notice. She had moved to Sunset Towers hoping to meet elegant people, but no one had invited her in for so much as a cup of tea. No one paid any attention to her, except that poor crippled boy whose smile could break your heart, and that bratty kid with the braid. She'll be sorry she kicked her in the shin. Juggling her load, earrings jingling and charm bracelet jangling, Sidel Pulaski unlocked the several locks to apartment 3C and bolted the door behind her. There'd be fewer burglaries around here if people listened to her about putting in deadbolt locks. But nobody listened, nobody cared. On the plastic-covered dining table, she set out the contents of the shopping bag, 6 cans of enamel, paint thinner, and brushes. She unwrapped the long package and leaned 4 wooden crutches against the wall. The sun was setting over the parking lot, but Sidel Pulaski did not look out her back window. From the side window, smoke could be seen rising from the Westing house. But Sidel Pulaski did not notice. No one ever notices Sidel Pulaski, she muttered, but now they will. Now they will. Chapter 4, The Corpse Found. The Halloween moon was full. Except for her receding chin, Turtle Wexler looked every inch the witch, her dark, unbraided hair streaming wild in the wind from under her peaked hat, a putty wart pasted on her small beaked nose. If only she could fly to the Westing house on a broomstick instead of scrambling over rocks on all fours, with all she had to carry. Under the long black cape, the pockets of her jeans bulged with necessities for the night's dangerous vigil. Doug Who had already reached the top of the cliff and taken his station behind the maple of the lawn. The track star was chosen timekeeper because he could run faster than anyone in the state of Wisconsin. Here she comes, it's about time. Shivering knee-deep in damp leaves that couldn't do his leg muscles much good, he readied his thumb on the button of the stopwatch. Turtle squinted into the blackness that lay within the open French doors, open as though someone or something was expecting her. There's no such thing as a ghost. Besides, all you had to do was speak friendly-like to them. Ghosts, like dogs, know when a person's scared. Ghosts, or worse, Otis Amber had said. Well, not even the worst could hurt Turtle Wexler. She was pure of heart indeed. She only kicked shins in self-defense, so that couldn't count against her. She wasn't scared. She was not scared. Hurry up, that was Doug from behind the tree. At $2 a minute, 25 minutes would pay for a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. She could stay all night. She was prepared. Turtle checked her pockets. 2 sandwiches, Sandy's flask filled with orange pop, a flashlight, her mother's silver cross to ward off vampires, the putty wart on her nose, soaked in Angela's perfume in the event she was locked up with the stinking corpse, was clogging her nostrils with sticky sweetness. Turtle took a deep breath of chill night air and flinched with pain. She was afraid of dentists, not ghosts. Or, don't think about purple waves. Think about $2 a minute. Now 1, 2, 3, 3.5, go! Doug checked his stopwatch. 9 minutes. 10 minutes. 11 minutes. Suddenly, a terrified scream, a young girl's scream, pierced the night. Should he go in, or was this one of the brat's tricks? Another scream, closer. Eee! Clutching the bunched cape around her waist, Turtle came hurtling out of the Westinghouse. Eee! Turtle had seen the corpse in the Westinghouse, but it was not rotting, and it was not sprawled on an oriental rug. The dead man was tucked in a 4-poster bed. A throbbing whisper, purple, purple. Or was it turtle, turtle? Whatever it was scary, had beckoned her to the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, and maybe it was a dream. No, it couldn't be. She ached all over from the tumble down the stairs. The moon was down, the window dark. Turtle lay in the narrow bed in her narrow room, waiting. Dark, still dark. Waiting. At last, slow morning crept up the cliff and raised the Westinghouse. The house of whispers. The house of death. $2 times 12 minutes equals $24. Thud. The morning newspaper was flung against the front door. Turtle tiptoed through the sleeping apartment to retrieve it and climbed back into bed, the dead man staring at her from the front page. The face was younger, the short beard darker, but it was he all right. Sam Westing found dead. Found? No one else knew about the bedded down corpse except Doug, and he had not believed her. Then who found the body? The whisperer? Samuel W. Westing, the mysterious industrialist who disappeared 13 years ago, was found dead in the Westingtown mansion last night. He was 65 years old. The only child of immigrant parents, orphaned at the age of 12, self-educated, hard-working, Samuel Westing saved his laborer's wages and bought a small paper mill. From these meager beginnings, he built the giant Westing Paper Products Corporation and founded the city of Westingtown to house his thousands of workers and their families. His estate is estimated to be worth over $200 million. Notice that we've used the word meager. From these meager beginnings. If I had to think about the context of meager, it seems like it's small or maybe poorer beginnings, right? That he didn't have a lot when he was younger, but made his fortune due to hard work. Turtle read that again. $200 million. Wow. When asked the secret of his success, the industrialist always replied, clean living, hard work, and fair play. Westing set his own example. He neither drank nor smoked and never gambled, yet he was a dedicated gamesman and a master at chess. Turtle had been in the game room. That's where she picked up the billiard cue she had carried up the stairs as a weapon. A great patriot, Samuel Westing was famous for his fun-filled 4th of July celebrations. Whether disguised as Ben Franklin or a lowly drummer boy, he always acted a role in the elaborately staged pageants which he wrote and directed. Perhaps best remembered was his surprise portrayal of Betsy Ross. Games and feasting followed the pageant, and at sunset, Mr. Westing put on his Uncle Sam costume and set off fireworks from his front lawn. The spectacular pyrotechnic display could be viewed 30 miles away. Fireworks? So that's what was in those boxes stamped dangerous explosives stacked in the ground floor storeroom. What a pyrotechnic display that would make if they all went off at the same time. The Paper King's later years were marred by tragedy. His only daughter, Violet, drowned on the eve of her wedding, and 2 years later, his troubled wife deserted their home. Although Mr. Westing obtained a divorce, he never remarried. 5 years later, he was sued by an inventor over rights to the disposable paper diaper. On his way to court, Samuel Westing and his friend, Dr. Sidney Sykes, were involved in a near-fatal automobile accident. Both men were hospitalized with severe injuries. Sykes resumed his Westingtown medical practice and the post of county coroner, but Westing disappeared from sight. It was rumored, but never confirmed, that he controlled the vast Westing Paper Products Corporation from a private island in the South Seas. He is still listed as chairman of the board. "We are surprised as you are and deeply saddened," a spokesman for Julian R. Eastman, president and chief executive officer of the corporation, stated when informed that Westing's body was found in his lakeside home. Dr. Sykes' response was, "A tragic end to a tragic life. Sam Westing was a truly great and important man." The funeral will be private. The executor of the Westing estate said the deceased requested that in place of flowers, donation be sent to Blind Bowlers of America. Okay, notice that. He wants donations sent to Blind Bowlers of America. It is possible that is a real organization, but it sounds a little suspicious. It's not an organization that we as a reader are familiar with. Turtle turned the page of the newspaper, but that was all. That was all? There was no mention of how the body was found. There was no mention of the envelope propped on the bedside table on which a shaky hand had scrawled, "If I am found dead in bed." She had been edging her way against the four-poster, reading the words in the beam of the flashlight, when she felt the hand, the waxy, dead hand that lay on the red, white, and blue quilt. Through her scream, she had seen the white, bearded face. She remembered running, tripping over the billiard cue, falling down the stairs, denting Sandy's flask, and dropping everything else. There was no mention of 2 suspicious peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on the premises, or a flashlight, or a silver cross on a chain. There was no mention of prowlers, no mention of anyone having seen a witch, no mention of footprints on the lawn, track shoes, and sneakers size 6. Oh well, she had nothing to fear other than losing her mother's cross. Old Mr. Westing probably died of a heart attack or pneumonia. It was drafty in there. Turtle hid the folded newspaper in her desk drawer, counted her black and blue marks in the mirror, 7, dressed, and set out to find the 4 people who knew she had been in the Westing house last night. Doug Who, Theo Theodorakis, Otis Amber, and Sandy. They owed her $24. At noon, the 62-year-old delivery boy began his rounds. He had 16 letters to deliver from E.J. Plum, attorney at law. Otis Amber knew what the letters said because one was addressed to him. As a named beneficiary in the estate of Samuel W. Westing, your attendance is required in the South Library of the Westing House tomorrow at 4 p.m. for the reading of the will. "Means old man Westing left you some money," he explained. "Just sign this receipt here." What do you mean? What does position mean? It means position, like a job. Most receipts have that to make sure the right person gets the right letter. Grace Windsor Wexler wrote housewife, crossed it out, wrote decorator, crossed it out, wrote heiress. Then she wanted to know, who else? How many? How much? I ain't allowed to say nothing. The other heirs were too stunned by the unexpected legacy to bother him with questions. Madame Who marked an X and her husband filled in her name and position. Theo wanted to sign the receipt for his brother, but Chris insisted on doing it himself. Slowly taking great pains, he wrote, Christos Theodorakis, bird watcher. By the time the sun had set behind the Sunset Towers parking lot, Otis Amber, deliverer, had completed his rounds. And that is where we are stopping today. So what I'd like to do to finish is to first come back to our apartment building. So taking a look at our apartment building, I'm going to hold this up here kind of pull it back just a touch so then you can see all of the people, where they live, including the Theodorakis coffee shop and Dr. Wexler's podiatrist office. You may want to pause the video in order to complete this and fill this out if you were doing this part of the activity with us. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is I want to bring us back to our T-chart, right? We were going to compare and contrast mysteries versus thrillers. So I'm going to give you some bullets and then we will discuss this more tomorrow before we read. Here are the differences between a mystery versus a thriller. So as I'm stating these, you can pause and write them down, or you can just write as many notes as you can get as I share. Mysteries usually begin with a crime, which is often murder. In this case, we have read the first 4 chapters and we have found the dead body of Mr. Sam Westing. The main character does not know who committed the crime, but is trying to figure out who did it. So in this case, Turtle found the body and her 4 friends knew that she was a part of finding the body, but nobody knows exactly how he died. Mysteries are often written in first-person point of view through the main character. So right now it feels like our main character is Turtle because we're seeing a lot of this through her eyes, but we're also bouncing around to the other tenants that live in this apartment building. So we're getting perspectives from each of the people who live in Sunset Towers. Mysteries have well-rounded characters. This gives the reader something to contemplate as the reader tries to solve the crime as details unfold. This is super important. There have already been quite a few hints as to certain characters who are upset with Sam Westing, who feel like he would get what was coming to him if he died, or who are bitter. We don't really know why, but we can sense that from some of the people who have already made their presence known in the story. Okay, the difference of a thriller. Thrillers begin with a situation that leads to a major disaster or tragedy. This could be a bank robbery, nuclear explosion, assassination. I frequently think of like action-packed movies that we watch, right? Like there's some big crisis that then everybody is trying to find the cure for, or trying to support, or trying to do something to deal with a situation, not with a crime. In a thriller, the main character is trying to prevent the catastrophe from occurring, right? So the whole premise is trying to stop whatever it's going to be, the bomb that's going to go off. Thrillers are often written in third-person point of view, meaning that it's not written necessarily through the eyes of one person, but through the action that is taking place. The narration, right? The narrator's point of view. And thrillers often have a lot of action as the main character races to prevent the disastrous event from occurring. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some notes, and I think that it's important that we identify this difference between the mystery versus thrillers. We will discuss more tomorrow. We have more to read. I'm really excited to find out who are these 16 beneficiaries. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. See you tomorrow.